This story is about my uncle Daniel. It happened several years ago, back when my aunt had just gotten married and my grandmother had come to stay with us for a while. Uncle Daniel used to sleep alone back then. After long shifts at work, he'd come home late, tired, quiet, and spend the night in that old house, alone. Let me say this. Strange things were already known to happen in my grandmother's house. It was almost expected. We'd gotten used to creaking doors, flickering lights, and cold patches in the hallway. But what happened this time was something Daniel's never been able to forget. It was a regular evening. He came home from work, had dinner, then headed out to see a few friends, just like always. That night, he took a shortcut through the far side of the neighborhood park. Nothing unusual, but when he came back, he felt off, like something was watching him. He brushed it off, went to bed, closed his eyes, and slipped into a dream. In the dream, he was back at work. It felt real, too real. He was standing in front of his desk, opened a drawer, and inside was a packet full of hair, black strands coiled tightly, like they'd been yanked straight off someone's scalp and stuffed inside. He was disturbed. He picked it up and walked to his manager, holding it out with shaking hands. The manager just stared at it and said something strange. "This is for the wife in whose work this belongs." Daniel didn't understand, but something about those words filled him with dread. He turned, walked outside, and that's when he saw them. A man, walking calmly toward him, holding a palm full of raw chicken meat. And behind him, a woman, tall, twisted, inhuman. Her spine was hunched, her limbs too long. She followed the man, her eyes locked on the meat in his hand, and then her tongue, long, wet, snake-like. It darted out and snatched the meat from his palm. She devoured it whole. That's when Daniel jolted awake, heart pounding, body drenched in sweat. He sat up, breathless, tried to shake the dream from his head, but he couldn't. He stepped out to drink water. The house was silent, dark, heavy. And then he saw her. The woman from his dream, standing silently, near the stereo system. She had her back to him, still, motionless. Daniel froze, rubbing his eyes, whispering to himself. Was it sleep paralysis? Was he hallucinating? But she didn't vanish. She stood there, real as anything, her skin black like tar, her hair long enough to reach her feet. It was impossible to tell whether she was even clothed. Her shape was wrong, bent, crooked, like she didn't belong in this world. And then she moved. Her neck slowly began to twist, turning toward him, bit by bit. He couldn't breathe. His knees buckled. He stumbled back into his room, slammed the door shut, threw himself into bed, pulled the blanket over his face, like that would protect him. But it didn't, because he could feel her, standing over him, then sitting, right next to his head. He could hear her breath, hear the shift of the bed sheets, like death itself had taken a seat beside him. He stayed like that, frozen, all night. And just when the silence had become unbearable, the soft sound of early morning church bells echoed through the neighborhood. And in that moment, she vanished, just like that. After that night, Daniel never slept alone again. He stopped taking shortcuts, stopped walking home late. And from that day forward, he always made sure a cousin or someone else stayed the night with him. Because now he knows. Sometimes dreams aren't dreams, they're warnings. Sometimes something follows you home. I won't share my name, I don't want to. But what I can tell you is that this happened in our old house. We stayed there for about 1.5 years, and for most of the first year, it was peaceful, safe, even. But the peace didn't last. The house had 2 floors. The upper floor wasn't part of the original plan. It was an extension my family had built. Basically, it was just one room up there. A servant quarter, I guess. Not much to look at. But someone lived in it for a while. A woman. We called her Auntie. She seemed fine, friendly. A little quiet maybe, but nothing unusual. And then, just a few months after she moved in, she left. No warning, no goodbye. Just gone. One day, after she had already moved out, my mum and I went up to that room. It was hot out. Quiet. I remember it clearly because of what we saw. A stray cat. It had slipped through the door and wandered inside. We thought it would come back out, but it didn't. After a while, we opened the door to check. The cat was still there, staring. Then, without a sound, it bolted past us and ran out. We didn't think much of it. But that was the first time we'd opened the room since Auntie had left. And after that, things started to change. At first, it was just me. I began waking up at 3 a.m. and walking. I'd go up to the roof, stand there alone. Sometimes in the dark, sometimes under moonlight. I don't even remember doing it. My uncle told me he saw me up there more than once, just standing still like I was waiting for something. When he asked me about it, I didn't know what he was talking about, but it got worse. My dad says my health started declining, slowly, quietly, like something inside me was decaying. And then, my behavior changed. I wasn't me anymore. I talked like someone else. My voice got deeper, angrier, and I became violent, rude, uncontrollable. One night I talked back, sick to my uncle, screamed at him, said things I don't even remember. He lost his temper and slapped me. And that's when something inside me snapped. I started laughing, loud, unhinged, like someone else had taken control of my body. I told him I'd kill him. My dad, who had been watching silently, suddenly began reading verses from the Bible, powerful words of protection. And as he read, my laughter twisted into something else, something darker. My brothers heard the noise and ran in. They pinned me down. Someone called the local church and got hold of Father Thomas, a church priest known for handling situations like this. He came with little ceremony, quiet, serious. He placed something on my head, a small cross-stitched cloth with biblical inscriptions. And then everything went black. The next thing I remember, I was lying on the floor, dizzy, numb. Father Thomas had gone up to the servants' room alone. When he came back, he looked shaken. He said, "That thing didn't just show up. It was brought here. Invited." He told us. It wasn't after me at first. It had followed her, the woman who used to live upstairs. She had trapped it, locked it in the room, and when we opened that door, we set it free. It wasn't supposed to get out. It wasn't supposed to attach to anyone else. But it did. When we asked why it was following her, why it had stayed behind, Father Thomas only shook his head. He said the entity refused to explain. It only said one thing. I don't care what you do. I'm not leaving this family alone. That same day, we packed, left the house behind. We never went back. We moved to a new place, smaller, quieter. We don't talk about that house anymore, and nothing strange has happened since, thank God. But sometimes, when I pass an old rooftop or see a closed room, I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't opened that door. Some things aren't meant to be disturbed. Some doors should stay locked. I don't talk about this often, mostly because I've spent years trying to forget it. But some houses, they don't let you forget. We used to live in Reed City, Michigan. I won't give you the exact street, but if you've ever passed those old grey apartment blocks near the corner diner, you know the ones. Tall, cold, with long, echoing hallways that stretch into shadows, and balconies that feel one step too close to the edge. We moved there in 2010. I was 5. Top floor, corner unit, 9 apartments in total, but it was ours that felt wrong. Not right away. It started small. My mum would be alone most mornings. 5 siblings off to school, my dad at work, and my baby brother eventually started daycare. That left her by herself. Quiet mornings, alone. That's when it began. She told us years later that she'd feel something touch her hair. Soft, gentle, like a child tugging from behind. She'd spin around, but no one would be there. Just the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, and a silence that stretched too long. She tried to brush it off, until she started finding strands of her blonde hair tied in odd knots under her vanity, woven into the folds of the bedspread, placed with care, like someone had collected them. And then, one day, while folding laundry, she looked up and watched the mattress dip, just slightly, the kind of movement you see when someone gets up from a bed that no one was lying on. That was the beginning. One weekend it was just me, my dad, and my older brother. Everyone else had gone to visit family. My brother was making a sandwich in the kitchen when he froze. His eyes locked on the hallway window, the one that faced the maintenance stairwell. That stairwell was always dark, always cold, even in the dead of summer. He said he saw someone, a man, dressed all in white, crawling, bent low, moving slowly past the window like some hurt, hing out of a broken mind. Then, gone. He sprinted to my dad. They searched everything. Every room. Every door. Nothing. No one. My mum, who's always been deeply religious, started walking the apartment, praying, whispering words of protection in every corner, and for a while, it worked. But not for long. We lived there until 2019. But the worst of it was between 2015 and 2016. That's when it got brave. We'd have blackouts constantly. The building was old. Lights would go out, sometimes for hours. One night we were all gathered in my brother's room, candles lit, telling stories. My 2 sisters had gone to the kitchen to grab more candles. When they came back, they stopped at the doorway. One of them looked at my brother and asked, "How did you get here so fast?" They said they saw him walking toward the living room seconds ago, but he'd been with us the whole time. He hadn't moved. So who or what did they see? Another time, power was out again. We were all gathered in the hallway, talking quietly in the dark. My parents had stepped into another room. When they returned, they were pale. My dad said, "Someone was walking toward us. In the dark. I saw a phone light. A man. But none of us had phones on. and none of us had left the hallway. There were other things. The mirror in the living room. We'd catch shadows moving behind us that weren't there. We'd hear whispers, quiet murmurs when the apartment was dead silent. One of my sisters swore she saw a child run past the hallway once, but the hallway was empty. Always empty. We had a small library room. It used to be the utility space. My dad converted it. Shelves, carpet, and a Bible always placed neatly on the top shelf. One day my brother's friend was in there reading alone. Suddenly he screamed. We rushed in. The Bible had flown across the room. Not fallen, not tipped. Flung. He swore he hadn't touched it, that it just launched through the air like someone threw it with hate. He left that night. Never came back. There was also the priest. One of my dad's church friends brought him, an older man, soft-spoken, calm. They sat in the living room talking, until the priest suddenly stood up. "We need to go," he said. My dad asked why. The man didn't answer until they were in the car. And then, quietly, he said, "I saw you, standing in the hallway, watching us." But my dad hadn't moved from the couch. Not once. But nothing was as terrifying as what happened to my sister. She was the skeptic. She laughed at ghost stories, mocked haunted house movies, said fear was a choice. Until one night, around 2 a.m., her bed began to shake, just enough to wake her. But she couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even open her eyes at first. And when she did, there was a woman standing over her, dressed in white, hair hanging over her face, so close their foreheads nearly touched. She felt the woman's breath on her cheek, felt hair brush her lips. She couldn't breathe, couldn't blink. From the room next door, my other sister screamed. She had seen her too. They both bolted to our parents' room, crying, shaking like kids again. From that night on, my sister never slept alone. Not for years. Not until we left. We never figured out what it was. A ghost? A spirit? Something older? I don't know. But that apartment wasn't empty. It never had been. Something lived there, and it didn't want us gone because it hated us. It wanted us gone because we noticed it. And that wasn't part of its plan.